Hey guys, welcome back to Jessin Reads Romance. I'm Jessin and today I'm doing my weekly wrap up. So I have a couple of books that I read. I totally forgot to talk about the Sarah J Maas books that I read a couple of weeks ago, but it was fine. I was doing vlogs, so I'm going to review both Empire of Storms and Tower of Dawn. I'm not going to go into great detail for both of them because we will be doing a live show as part of the Sarah J Maas read along that we're doing. Jen from the Book Refuge put it all on, and she has the dates for the live shows on her Instagram. The live show in the discussion for Empire of Storms is going to be on August 31st on Crystal's channel at 7 p.m. Central Time. So if you want to come chat, join us. Okay, Empire of Storms. This is the 5th book in the series, and obviously if you haven't read up to this point, may or may not be spoilers, but I'm not going to go into great detail. I do have the Dusty Shops dust jackets for this series, and it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. So I'm going to show you the artwork real quick because I'm obsessed with it. The front cover is beautiful, and the characters on the back as well. So Empire of Storms. My overall rating for Empire of Storms was 4 stars. I enjoyed it, but I do feel like Sarah J Maas tends to meander a lot in the middle of her books. Also, we get a little bit, like I said, spoilers, we get a little bit of a return of the Selena personality in this book. And I understand why, but I don't like Selena. If you have watched my review for the other books, I really didn't love the type of person Aylin was when she was using Selena's name. And we get that little personality check back in. Also, another thing, which I acknowledge, that Sarah J Maas has referenced this in the book. Aylin is self-aware, and the characters are aware that Aylin likes to make plans and not let anybody else in on the plans, or like a select few people. And then at the end, it's kind of like, it's a reveal for the reader because we weren't aware of Aylin's plans. Even when we're in her point of view, we don't know everything. There's stuff that she keeps secret from the reader. And then at the end, it's like, oh, I kind of planned for this. This is my contingency plan. And it kind of annoys me. That's a character trait that I don't love about Aylin, which is why Aylin is never going to be one of my favorite heroines in the Sarah J Maas world, but that's fine because there's so many great heroines to choose from. I really love Manon. She's one of my favorites, definitely one of my favorite point of views for this book in particular. And I also really love Elide. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but I really loved her storyline as well. So those are my 2 favorites, and I did like Empire of Storms, but also it just feels like, you know, a middle chapter in a book. It was fine, and of course, like, everything happens in the end. Like all Sarah J Maas books, there's so much stuff that happens in the end. You almost feel like it's too much information at the end. It's like you could have spread some of this out, but it's fine. Big things happen at the end. Spoiler alert, if you have yet to read this book, Aylin gets captured by Maeve. She gets put in this mask and in an iron box so that she can't use her powers, and she's going to be taken to somewhere. We don't know where. I know where because I read the next book. But the point being, Aylin is captured. Rowan, of course, is hurting. There is another secret wedding, which I found funny when I was talking to Jen and stuff. She was just like, she likes doing her secret weddings because she did it for Reese and Farah as well. And it's true. I think that Sarah J Maas recycles a lot of things. She has certain things that she loves to do in her books, and you can find them in different series. This just so happens to be one of them. There's a really cool revelation about Manon. I love the journey that it sends her on. I did start reading also Kingdom of Ash, but I haven't had time to jump back in. I've only read like the first, maybe 5th or 4th of the book. But yeah, anyway, 4 stars for this one. Then, again, if you have not read Queen of Shadows, this cover could be a little bit spoilery. This dust jacket made for Tower of Dawn could be a little bit spoilery, but if you haven't even read the series, you wouldn't even begin to wonder who this is. So anyway, Tower of Dawn. Fucking love this cover. It's so beautiful. Like, look at that. Oh my gosh, I love this cover. It's probably one of my favorites dust jackets in the series. Actually, this one, and I mean, I really love the Queen of Shadows ones as well, just because it's like, Manon looks fucking amazing there. Okay, Tower of Dawn. I loved Tower of Dawn. So I heard so many things, and I understand why. I heard so many things about like, oh, Tower of Dawn. But from what I've heard from people who are reading the series as they're being released, and you know, the cliffhanger that happens in Empire of Storms, then when Tower of Dawn released, Jen told me that it was supposed to be a little novella. Ended up by being a full-length book, and there was a very long wait period between Empire of Storms and Kingdom of Ash, and you don't know what's going to happen to Aelin. So it's like people were chomping at the bit, being like, why do we have to take this little side journey? Because this book in particular focuses on Kaol and, oh my god, what is her name? And I love her character, is it Nesrin? There's so many different characters, and I almost want to say Nesta, but that's not, this wrong series. There's so many characters to keep straight in my mind. What is her name? Okay, it is Nesrin. Kaol and Nesrin were tasked with going to the southern continent and hopefully getting allies in the southern continent. They have the royal family, who, like, the kind of politics around that royal family kind of reminds me of the Targaryens in Game of Thrones. It's like kind of cutthroat who will inherit the next throne. The kids kind of like, there's a tradition of basically killing your rivals, and that was all very interesting. But the current Kagan, or however you say it, the king there, they basically have to like convince him to help Aelin in the fight that will happen in Kingdom of Ash. While they're there, Kaol, at the end of Queen of Shadows, there was an accident, and as a result his spine was injured, so he is currently using a wheelchair. And there are some renowned healers that work in the tower, and so they're trying to figure out, is there a way for Kaol to get the use of his legs back? I really love the struggle, the crisis that Kaol is going through, and I really love the way that he works through it. Now, I know that a lot of people who read the Throne of Glass series, they don't like Kaol. I've never disliked him. I think that he did some shitty things in Queen of Shadows, I believe it was. I was just kind of like, but I mean, like, Selena / Aelin has done worse, so I'm just kind of like, I don't care. Anyway, I've liked Kaol a lot, and I loved the romance between Kaol and Yrene. Loved it. Wonderful backstory for her. So cool. Loved all of the healing sessions. I love how they grew closer. I also really loved the cool details that we discover when Yrene is reading these old ancient texts, trying to figure out how to defeat the Volg and stuff like that. Is there something in these ancient texts that the southern continent has that would be beneficial? I highlighted a lot of that stuff because of possible crossover between multiple series, and that'll be interesting to talk about when there is a live show for Tower of Dawn. I'm not going to go look up when that one is because it's not anytime soon, but I can't wait to talk about this. So anyway, I really love Tower of Dawn. I gave it 5 stars. And I kind of went into this book with low expectations because a lot of people, they just groan a lot when they say Tower of Dawn because they're re-experiencing that moment when they figured out that they were going to have to wait so long to get the conclusion to the series with Kingdom of Ash, because this is very much like a sidestep in the story. And I understand that, but like, oh God, I fucking love this so much. It was beautiful. It felt a little bit more intimate because there was less characters. There was only like 2 main couples, Nesrin and Sartak, and Kaol and Yrene. And I just really loved it so much. So yeah, beautiful, beautiful story. Beautiful. Loved it. Next, I read Sword Heart by T. Kingfisher, and this was a recommendation from Crystal. She was actually just telling me, she's just like, yeah, I'm currently reading Sword Heart. She had read a T. Kingfisher a couple weeks ago, and she's just like, I just really love the writing style. And Crystal was telling me about the opening in Sword Heart. The heroine, Hela, she's inherited lots of money from an uncle by marriage. Okay, so she was married, her husband died, she's a widow and has been for many years. And when the wealthy, eccentric uncle dies, instead of leaving the money to like his nieces, nephews, whatever, the cousins, he leaves it to Hela. And the surviving relatives are just kind of like, absolutely not. This girl's a nobody. Like, she came from this small little farm and she's been mooching off of him for years. They're horrible people, by the way. Anyway, they're terrible to Hela. They're trying to force Hela to marry one of the cousins. There's this, like, I forgot what her name was, but she's basically the mom, and she wants that money so bad. So she's like, you're basically gonna marry my son. And when Hela says no, they lock her in a room and they're like, oh, we'll wait until you come to your senses. So while she's there, she's just kind of like, I can't live like this. I can't live like this. And if I die, then my money goes to my sisters. My sisters really need the money. So I think I'm just going to sacrifice myself. And all of this is written in a very humorous way. It's like a dark situation, obviously. She's contemplating suicide so that the money will default to her sisters. But it's all written in a very, very, very humorous way. And Hala is a very humorous type of character. The way that her perspective is written on page is very cool. She has this decorative sword that's been hanging on top of her bed in her small little room. So she gets it out and she is contemplating like, what's the angle that I can best skewer myself through the heart. And as she pulls it out, there's this like blue smoke, and all of a sudden a man is in her room. And his name is Sarkis. And his immediate reaction is just kind of like, can you please cover your breasts? Because she like put her dress down, her chemise down, because she didn't want any barrier. And he's just kind of like, you know, I'm used to being summoned on the battlefield. I've never been summoned in a brothel before. And she's like, this is not a brothel. I'm like, no, I'm not a doxy or whatever. It's just a really funny situation. We find out that he is part of the sword. He inhabits the sword. He is a spirit. He had died. There was this witch that put his soul in the sword. And he tells you a little bit about his backstory and stuff. And whoever owns the sword, which Hala now currently owns the sword, is the person that he's loyal to. And so he's like, well, if they're keeping you prisoner, like, I'm gonna help you get out of here. If your life is in immediate danger, like, I'm gonna get you out of there. So it's a journey, it's an adventure, it's so fun, it's endearing, it's beautiful, it's a slow burn romance, I will say, slow burn romance. Do not expect tons of sexy times in here, but the characters are so freaking cute and adorable and cool, and I loved it. There were like minor little nitpicky things that I'm like, I wish the author wouldn't have done this, or wish they would have tightened up like the middle, but none of it was enough for me to really dock any stars. I'm gonna give this book 5 stars. I thought it was really cool, and I really want to read more by T. Kingfisher. Next, I finally picked up Tattered Stars by Catherine Cowles. I've been seeing this series everywhere, and they have such beautiful covers. I mentioned in a previous video that I wanted to pick this up because Tori from Novel Life has taken such beautiful pictures of this series in particular, and I was just kind of like, okay, yes, I got the audio, and this audio is very, very easy to listen to. Incredible narrators, especially in the first book. I think all 3 books have different narrators. I can't remember who narrates Tattered Stars. Love the narration for this one. It's a small town romance, and it kind of starts off a little bit enemies, but not really. It's not an enemies to lover type of situation. It's more, I was gonna say Family Feud, but that's not technically correct anyway. I'm gonna start from the beginning. It starts off with the prologue. Everly, sorry about the light, just absolutely leaving, but Everly is, I think, 9, 10, around that age, and she is sneaking out of her house late at night, and she gets on her horse and she rides to the police station in town. And she informs them, hey, the local girl that has been missing, she's in my shed. And at first I think that she's joking. She's like, no, my father saw her at like the fair or whatever, and he thinks that he can save the girl because her father is obviously suffering with some mental illness, but her father and his family grew up in a way that they want to live off the land. They want to be totally independent of like modern society. They want to be very self-sufficient, grow their own food, rely on the land, all that type of stuff. But her father is very warped. His mindset is very warped, and he thinks that he needs to save this girl, that her family don't care about her and they're not good Christian people, whatever. So he kidnaps her and he is keeping her in the shed, but now Everly, this child, is worried because she notices that the girl's not eating anymore, not drinking, and she looks like she's getting weaker. So she takes it upon herself to basically betray her family and tell the sheriff, you know, the girl's at my house. And when she's at the sheriff's office, she sees the family of the little girl walk in, and she locks eyes with one of the little boys, which is the brother. His name is Hayes Easton, and this is our hero. After all of the crazy fallout from that, we find out that Everly was sent to live with her older sister, who had moved away and lives in the city because her father's family looked at Everly like she was a traitor, going to the cops, like, that is not done. And you've betrayed our family. And so she hasn't been back to this town in years. Well, her mom passed away, and she actually willed the land where she grew up on to Everly. And Everly wants to go back and kind of like start fresh and use that land for good, and she wants to make it an animal sanctuary for animals who have been abused and they need a place to recover and live with somebody who can take care of her. And she's a vet tech, so she got a job locally. Well, when Hayes Easton, who is the younger brother of Shiloh, the person who was kidnapped, finds out that Everly is back in town and living on that land, he is absolutely positively like, no. Why does she want to dredge up old memories? He feels lots of guilt because the day that his sister was kidnapped, he was supposed to be watching her, was supposed to be holding her hand, but he wanted to play a game instead. And then, so he feels immense guilt. And he's the person that's trying to hold his family together because Shiloh's not the same. She likes to keep to herself a lot. And the mom's reaction, I think her name is Jules, the mom's reaction has been interesting. She gives Shiloh her space, but she wanted the family to really stick together. And the dynamic with Hadley, one of the other younger sisters, is interesting because she basically is just kind of like wanting to know where her family is at like all times, which is understandable. Everyone has gone through a trauma with this experience. But I really love the way that Hayes' parents are just kind of like, the reason why your sister Shiloh survived is because of Everly. I'm so grateful. I can't wait to tell her thank you. Hayes feels completely different. He's just like, I want her. She's a reminder of it all and I want her gone. So he's mean to her when she first comes to town. And then he quickly changes his tune. And I really love that. So I really love the way that Everly and Hayes start to bond and kind of heal together. And I thought it was really beautiful the way that his family really welcomed Everly into the fold. Now, of course, she has to deal with her family who thinks that she's a traitor. So she has an uncle, a cousin, Adeline, who she feels so horrible leaving her. But she and her cousin Adeline were very close. And she knows that Adeline's father is abusive, just like her father was abusive. And also, she has a brother named Ian, who Ian was abusive to her as well, especially after he found out that, you know, you betrayed our dad. So there's lots of trauma that has went on in the past, and that has a lot to do with the conflict. I really loved it. I thought it was fantastic. I gave it 4.5 stars. The next book in the series, Falling Embers, I immediately jumped into the next audiobook. And this one's about Hadley and Calder. So Calder is the best friend of Hayes, and he's a firefighter. Hadley is the younger sister that I was talking about, and she and her mom Jules, like, they have a very contentious relationship, and I'll get into that in a minute. But Hadley is the way that she dealt with all of this, the response that her mom had to almost losing a daughter was for Jules to hang on really tight to Hadley, insisting that she can't go to parties unless there was a parent around. She couldn't go to sleepovers and stuff like that. So Hadley grew up wanting to be rebellious, wanting to sneak out. She's a little bit of a daredevil, and she is now like an adrenaline junkie. She seeks those moments where adrenaline is pumping high and she feels alive. And Hadley has this secret account, and her name is the Little Daredevil, which has a lot to do with her and Calder. And she performs stunts. So she has like a little team that videos her and edits it and handles the social media and stuff. And so she performs stunts, she gets sponsorships and stuff. And this is a secret part of her life. Her parents don't know, her siblings don't know. Her mom is always berating her for being reckless, for being irresponsible. And she really gets on Hadley's case for being like 5 minutes late. And if Shiloh's 5 minutes late, it's fine. It's like, oh, Shiloh needs her space. But Hadley, the relationship is not good with the mom. The dad's just trying to be a peacekeeper, and so is Hayes, and Hadley is suffering so much. Like inside, she's just kind of like, I hate that I'm being singled out for this. It's not fair. It's not fair. And she just feels like she's getting pummeled emotionally by her mom. Calder, like I said, is Hayes' best friend. And Calder was the one to actually show her, like take her on her first like mountain bike ride and kind of like give her an outlet for this frustration that she was feeling when she was in high school, just wanting to go to a party. And her mom was just like, no, you can't go. So Calder and Hadley actually were really, really close. Calder is a single dad. He has an ex. I think her name's Jackie. Hadley always had a crush on Calder. She's very close with both of his daughters. He has twin daughters, Birdie and Sage, and they're super cute. I do like the relationship between Hadley and Calder, but I will say that some of Catherine Cowell's writing is frustrating, and it's the way that she writes her female characters, and it's because I've read 3 in a row. You can really tell when you're reading a book back to back and the author is using kind of like similar character traits and also similar plot devices in every book. It just feels very repetitive. So I would say that these books, I don't think they're bingeable, at least not to me. I would have rathered if I spaced them out. Maybe I wouldn't have felt like, oh, this is very similar to how it played out in book 1. And then I read book 3 and I'm like, that's very similar to how it played out in book 2. So it just felt a little bit repetitive, and I do want to point out some specific things, so I'm going to get into spoilers. So one of the things that annoyed me a lot, Everly wanted to feel independent in book 1. She had a person who was stalking her and stuff, but I understood. She's like, I gotta live my life. I'm going to be as safe as possible and stuff. And I thought Everly handled it pretty well. Of course, at the end of Tattered Stars, when Everly gets kidnapped by her childhood friend Ben, who I suspected it was him, she was alone for that moment, but she wasn't alone on her property. So it felt organic. Like, that felt organic, and I was fine with it. Then I'm reading Hadley's book. Hadley legit has a stalker. She has somebody who has discovered her home phone number, or her cell phone number, her home address, who is leaving her nasty, threatening messages. And I understand to an extent that Hadley has struggled with, like, she needs to be on her own. She doesn't want to be caged in because of what her mom's doing to her. But literally, you're in the middle of being stalked. The police are on the case. And when she has like a confrontation with her mom, her immediate response is just kind of like, I need to be alone. I need to go driving alone. And I'm just like, what a fucking idiot. Like, I know that you need your independence. She harps on it the whole book about, like, I need to be on my own. I'm fine on my own. I can take care of myself. I have self-defense lessons. La, 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 la. And I'm just like, but you're an idiot. Someone is legit stalking you. The minute you're alone, your life is in danger. And of course, that's what happens. A car tries to run her off the cliff. Well, does run her off the cliff. She's already been chased down by a car at the end of the first book. So I was just very frustrated with her character, craving independence so much so that she would put her life at risk for it. I thought it wasn't worth it, you know? And I just feel like these characters it's like a very common theme for her heroines, Catherine Cowell's heroines, to need to prove themselves to whoever it is. If it's their mom, their family, their significant other in the book, they need to prove that they can take care of themselves and they don't need a babysitter all the time. And I'm like, normally that would be true, but if someone is stalking you, if someone is out to get you, if your family has literally beaten you in the past, as was the case in book 1, you're gonna have to sacrifice your independence a little bit to stay safe until the culprits are caught. And it just aggravated me about Hadley. Also, another thing, the way that the mom went in on Hadley, so fucking hard. There were some gut-wrenching scenes where the mom was berating Hadley, calling her irresponsible, saying like, why are you with Calder? You're basically going to ruin his and his daughter's lives because you're so reckless, you're irresponsible, and he would be better off with somebody else. Like, she's saying this to her daughter, and I was just like, holy shit. I thought it was interesting in the beginning because Jules, the way that Jules was so open and welcome to Everly, the contrast was so vast with her relationship with Hadley. It was the polar opposite relationship. And I was very interested in exploring that. And then at the end, toward the end, you know, they have the big blow up. Her mom's really not apologetic. She's really not getting it that she's kind of tearing her family apart. And the reason why they reconcile is because Hadley almost dies. And I feel like the mom didn't do a lot of work on herself. You don't get to witness her mom having like that come to Jesus moment, being like, wow, I was way out of line. I'm so sorry. It was mostly just kind of like, oh, I almost lost a daughter, so I'm sorry. But like, I wish she would have come to that realization without Hadley's life being in danger. It just felt kind of anticlimactic for their relationship. So anyway, I gave this one 4 stars, but honestly, it might be like a 3.5 stars just because I read Hidden Waters, which is the 3rd book of the series, and I like that one slightly more. I don't know, it's hard to rate the series. The first book I loved the most, and the next 2 books were just okay for me. So Hidden Waters is about Addie. This is Everly's cousin, the one who grew up with an abusive father. She's very sheltered, and she was basically her dad's punching bag, and like, women basically don't have rights in their small community. And her parents, or her dad and Everly's dad, they took that to the extreme. There's some people in the community that they just want to live off the land type of thing, and they can still be like respectful to their families, but not so with Everly and Adeline's family. So Addie has escaped from her father, and she's trying to work to be more independent. Like I said, this is like a favorite thing of Catherine Cowell's, at least in the series. She's very wary of men, And I really like the forced proximity situation. She becomes roommates with the older brother, Beckett Easton. Beckett has been traveling the world as a doctor, and he's recently come home because of the events that happened in book 2. So he needs a place to stay while his house is being built, and since Addie is living in Hayes' old house, he's offered the room in the other in the house, and Addie does accept because she's just kind of like, I need to start pushing my limits, pushing my boundaries, and seeing if I can be comfortable around a man. Like, we're just gonna be roommates, you know? And of course, they fall in love during the course of this. I thought their relationship was really sweet. Now, again, spoilers. This is spoilers. I don't really love how every single conflict in the book have been so melodramatic. I thought it made total sense for book 1. Everly and like the revenge that her uncle and her brother wanted to meet out against her, like the torching of the barn and stuff in book 1. I thought that was all pretty great. Ben, of course, being the weirdly obsessed with Everly piece to that puzzle, the person that was kind of like stalking her and being like, you're the one for me. There's just I would say that there's a lot of mental illness in this community, and I think it's being a little overused because the dad was mentally ill. Ben obviously was delusional, thinking that, sorry, my battery's about to die. I've been talking for way too long, sorry. Where was I? So Ben, being delusional, thinking that God let his first wife die in childbirth because it was always supposed to be Everly type of thing. Obviously, some wires are being crossed. And book 2, we have Jackie, and then, who was her? Calla? Was her name Calla? Also being there's just lots of people in this community that are willing to kill people to get what they want. That's basically what's happening. So in book 3 with Addie, her father literally threatens her so much, and then she has this man who her father kind of promised her to, trying to sexually assault her, and it's just a fucking lot. I just will say, there's just so much dramatics going on in this series, and they're all very over-the-top conflicts being brought to the table in the latter half of the book. And it just feels kind of exhausting. It feels like a very similar story is being told in every single book, except with a different character, but they all go through this slightly stalkerish conflict that someone's either trying to possess them or kill them. So it feels a little repetitive. That's why I say that I don't think that, for me, Catherine Cowell's books will be bingeable. And I'm not sure if it's just this series that this happens in, or if it's all of her series kind of play out in a similar way. It's not that I don't want to read more Catherine Cowell's. I probably will, but I would definitely need to space them out. So anyway, yeah, this one, like I said, it was a fine book. It's 4 stars. Like, I enjoyed it. It was very easy to listen to, but I do have some issues, I guess. Next, I read The Pirate Lore by Sabrina Jeffries. I read this for our Patreon exclusive pick, which we're going to be doing tonight on Patreon, and I actually really enjoyed this. This was written in the 2000s, I believe. Never mind, 98. Close enough. This is written in 98. I feel like it has definitely the relationship between the hero and the heroine are pretty typical for books written in the late 90s, early 2000s and stuff, but I enjoyed it. The heroine, Sarah, is the stepdaughter of an earl. The earl has passed away, and her stepbrother is the new earl of Blackmore, I think. And she is a reformist. She wants to reform the laws in London, and she always has like these harebrained schemes. Her most recent one that Jordan is trying to thwart her on in the beginning is that Sarah has been visiting Newgate Prison, and she wants to travel on a boat that is going to Australia with female convicts, because she thinks that, you know, the punishment for female convicts is so vastly different for male convicts. The fact that, first of all, some of the females are being punished for something so minor as like stealing a loaf of bread, having to be deported to Australia. And she's like, I know horrendous things happen on these ships, and wants to get to New South Wales or whatever. So she's like, I'm gonna ride on this boat and protest and write about what I find, and this issue needs to be brought to light. Something's gotta give with this. Jordan is just kind of like, you're gonna do this anyway, aren't you? Fine, you can go, but you have to promise me you stay safe. He secretly kind of sends somebody to watch over her on the boat. And of course, while she's on this ship, I also love Sarah wants to protect the women as best she can, so she goes into their holding cells. They're allowed kind of like free reign to like walk between the cells during the day. And she wants to like teach them their letters, teach them how to read, teach them how to sew and stuff like that. And she's also trying to protect them from sailors coming in the middle of the night and having their way with them, and their children too being deported with their mothers as well. So Sarah is, you know, the protector of these women. There are a few that are kind of like important side characters. Like we have Anne, who she's from Wales and she's just super sweet. We have Queenie, who she's a prostitute and she's loud and just in your face. And then, oh God, is it Laura? I forgot. Starts with an L. But you can tell that she has been assaulted, and that's what she's been convicted for, is attacking the person who was assaulting her, and now she gets deported. She is very wary of men. Well, there is this pirate lord. He's an American, and he's renowned for boarding ships belonging to English nobility. He particularly targets the nobility. He has some vendetta against English nobles, okay? He wants to retire from the pirating business. They found this quiet island and they need to look for wives. They're on this other island that is actually inhabited, looking for wives. Nobody's really game to like start basically a new society on this untamed land. And his first mate basically reports like, hey, there is this ship with female convicts heading to Australia. We should totally take all of them and they could be our wives. It's bonkers, but so fun. So Gideon is like, yeah, sounds like a plan. And we'll be rescuing these women because the conditions in New South Wales are horrible. So yeah, let's go rescue these women by kidnapping them. So they kidnap them and Sarah's with them. He was going to let Sarah go, but then she has to bring up her connection to her brother, who is the Earl of Blackmore. And he decides, oh, you're nobility. I have a problem with nobility. You're going to come to the island too. And he tells them that they're going to have to marry his crew members. So it's just a battle of wills between Sarah and Gideon. And I really did like their relationship, but I also felt like Sarah was like hot and cold a lot of the times. And that's what I feel like is pretty typical of couples in historical romance that are written in the 90s, the late 90s and the early 2000s. So I liked it. It was enjoyable. It wasn't like the best historical romance that I've ever read, but it was fun. It was a fun time. Then I picked up Painted Scars by Neva Altaj. I'm so sorry, I'm pronouncing her last name very wrong probably. This is the first book in the Perfectly Imperfect series. It's a mafia romance. It's also like an arranged marriage, a blackmailed arranged marriage. So Roman Petrov is the pecan of the Bratva. And recently there's been an attempt on his life and he had his, I think, knee shattered. So he's currently using a wheelchair and he feels like it was an attempt on his life. Someone is betraying him. Someone close to him is betraying him. He needs to find out who it was. He thinks that by getting fake married, he can have a wife to first look like he's strong. You know, he has a wife, beautiful wife or whatever. And also he can use her to kind of like plant listening devices around the house so that he can discover which one of his inner circle has betrayed him. So there's this man who has a daughter, and he basically tried to steal from Roman. So he's like, hey, I need your daughter to marry me for 6 months and then we'll get divorced or whatever. So Nina, she's an artist, and this is a pretty, I want to say like, I don't want to say it's like low stakes, but Nina agrees because she knows there's nothing else that she can do to this marriage because her father did try to steal from, you know, the Russian mafia. So she's just like, oh shit, okay, fine, I have to marry this guy Roman. And he promises that it will be a marriage in name only. And she basically just kind of like, I'm gonna make the best of a bad situation. So she's like, okay, fine. She plays the part. She even adopts this like persona. She's like, what kind of wife do I need to be? And he said it would help if my wife would be looked upon as somebody who doesn't really have that much brains. So she's like, okay, she's like creating this persona that she adopts every time she's out in public. But of course, behind closed doors in their suites, they fall for each other. And I thought it was really cute. I think that the third act conflict was so dumb. So dumb. It really brought the book down for me. So I ended up by giving this book 3 stars. I like was really enjoying it. I was like, oh, this is like a sweet mafia, you know, a sweet mafia romance. And then the third act conflict, like the lead up to all that, I was just kind of like, your reasoning is not very sound. I don't like this. I was like, this is very forced. The author is forcing this conflict to happen because they think that there needs to be a big breakup in the third act. And I was just kind of like, no, don't like it. So 3 stars for that one. Then I read Mercy. So I really like the Salacious Players Club, and this is the 4th book. Slight spoilers if you haven't read the 1st book, but the hero of this one, his name is Beau. He is 22, and he is the ex-boyfriend of the heroine from the 1st book, Praise. Beau and Charlie used to date, and then in Praise, Charlie ends up with Beau's dad. Yeah, so that happens. In this book, it's another age gap romance with an older woman. And the heroine Maggie is another owner in the Salacious Players Club, but she also kind of feels like undervalued. Like she doesn't feel as much of an ownership to the Salacious Players Club. And the only reason why she even went in on this partnership was because she needed a job. Emerson basically said like he couldn't run it without her. So she became like the 4th player. And this idea for this app turned sex club. Now the thing about it is Maggie actually, she grew up in a very kind of like with a conservative background, so she feels uncomfortable with like public displays of affection and sexiness or feeling sexy and stuff like that. Like she doesn't feel sexy herself, and she struggles, you know, with intimacy and all that jazz, and she thinks that she's just extremely vanilla. Well, when she recently bought her new house, the guys and their wives/girlfriends come over, and the girls kind of basically pressure Maggie into taking the quiz on her own app, like the app that has made them all money. And it's a quiz that's kind of like, it tells you what your kinks are. So she takes the quiz and she gets the results that say that she's a dominant and a brat tamer as well. And at first she's just kind of like, this is ridiculous. No. No, what is it? No. I'm vanilla. I'm so vanilla. This does not sound right. Well, Beau also decides to take the quiz, and he has a very complicated relationship with his father, and the fact that his father is the owner of a local sex club, it's become notorious in the town now, and so he feels a little bit embarrassed about that. Obviously has some resentment when it comes to his dad's relationship with his ex-girlfriend, so there's just a lot going on with Beau, and he is a bit of a brat. So when he takes the quiz and he gets submissive and also like seeking punishment, like punishment seeking and stuff like that, he and Maggie match, and he doesn't know. So it's like kind of like a secret identity type of thing. They don't know that they have matched with each other. And they know each other in real life. So it's a little bit taboo, and I thought it was really great. I did have like a couple minor nitpicky things about it. Maggie, on the one hand, I really liked her struggle with trying to reconcile what she thought about herself, and like, I like the way that Sarah Kate lets people in this series explore kinks that they never knew that they had. I think that lots of BDSM books, there's always like this person who's very experienced in some sort of aspect of kink or BDSM, and they know all the ins and outs of it, and they're very comfortable in their role. And then we have, you know, the other person who's being introduced to that world. But a lot of times the characters are exploring together kinks and like figuring it out together, and that's what happens with Maggie and Beau. They're figuring out things that they never knew that they wanted, and I really like that. And I liked Maggie's evolution. I did get frustrated with it at times because I wanted her to be a little bit more assertive in her role in the company. That was one of the things that I felt like I didn't really love how passive she was through the majority of the book. I wanted her to speak up more and being like, hey, I feel like you guys are seen as more the owners, and even though I have the same stakes in the company as you guys, I feel like I do a little bit more of the minor work. And it's kind of like two sides of the same coin, because on the one hand, Maggie doesn't like to delegate, so she doesn't want to delegate the minor tasks anyway, but I don't really feel like we have a good conversation between Maggie and the other owners of just kind of like what type of role she wants to play. And I don't know, I feel like I wanted them to acknowledge how vital Maggie was and how much they appreciated her, and how maybe they were taking advantage of her for a long time and needed to just recognize that. Anyway, it was a fun time. Interesting kinks being explored in this one. I thought it was very interesting reading about Beau. I mean, he's a very masculine man, but in the bedroom, he did not know that he craved being told what to do, basically. He wanted that out of his hands, and he likes being told what to do. He's rebellious. He wants like attention from his dad and stuff like that. And I really just like the way that translated into his relationship with Maggie and how he matured after starting a relationship with Maggie, and I really like that. So I thought it was cool. I gave it 4 stars. I think this is a very, very interesting series. Then, okay, so I just kind of like hit a rut when it comes to these next books. I picked up Last on the List by Amy Dawes. I think this is the 5th book in her Wait With Me series. I have read the 1st book in that series, maybe the 2nd book, I can't remember, it was a long time ago, and I've also read one more book by Amy Dawes. And I know that she writes like humorous romances, and sometimes her humor is just, it doesn't land with me, and I feel like that's what happened in this book. It wasn't that the story was like terrible or anything. It's a nanny romance. The hero Max is very rich, and he has a young daughter named Everly. He's co-parenting with his wife. I think his wife has some sort of business trip during the summer that's going to take her to England, and they have to decide on a nanny. And I really love their relationship between Cozy, this is her nickname, but they all call her Cozy, which I don't know, I never really vibed with that. It was just weird to me. Anyway, Cozy, I like the relationship between Cozy and Everly, the young daughter, because she was insistent that it's the summer and kids' brains need to relax, because Max is just kind of like, I need my daughter to not just waste her summer. She has swimming lessons and dance lessons, and she needs to read a book a week, and she needs to do book reports on it and stuff. And Cozy is just kind of like, I want her to have fun because she's a kid. And I really like what Cozy is doing for that kind of father-daughter relationship as well, because co-parenting is hard for him and his wife. He wants to be there, but he's working incredibly hard because he doesn't come from money. He's a self-made man, and he has worked for everything that he got, and he wants his daughter to have everything. Well, he is realizing that, you know, he is a workaholic and he doesn't spend a lot of time with his daughter, and that changes once Cozy is on the scene. And she's living in the little, like, there's a little cottage on his big McMansion property. And there's just lots of like humorous situations. They say that she's a plus size heroine. She's always complaining that her boobs are too big. It's my least favorite type of plus size heroine. I know that it's weird to say, but like the majority of the time she's just complaining that her boobs are too big. And I'm just kind of like, I don't know. I was so sick and tired of hearing about how big her boobs were. And she's just like, oh no, there's no way that he could like such a boobalicious girl as me. I was just like, oh my god, okay. Anyway, he loved her body, and she has a little bit of low self-esteem, which I don't mind, but she was very down on herself for a long time, even after they were together sexually, being like, I'm not his type, and people like him don't like people like me. And it's just, you know, the longer it goes on in a story, in a romance, because you know they're gonna get together, the more frustrated, and like I wish that there would be that aha moment where she just realizes that she is good enough for him earlier in the book. I don't want it to be at the very end. That's just personal preference for me. But yeah, like I said, the humor in this book I felt was a little bit forced and over the top, and that's just personal preference for me. So it was okay. I gave it 3 stars. Then I picked up Bad Night Stand by Elise Faber. I don't know if I even heard anybody ever talk about this book. Don't know how it landed in my lap, but it was on AnyPlay, and I started listening to it last night. And the heroine, Abby, she has not been laid in quite a while. She and her friend go out one night to the bar, and there's this beautiful man who looks like Chris Hemsworth, Thor. She calls him Thor. And he flirts with her. She also has low self-esteem. I was like, I'm tired of the low self-esteem heroines. I need something else. And she just kind of like, there's no way that he's flirting with me so that he can get to my best friend, because my best friend's prettier. That's not the case. Jordan's actually flirting with Abby. They go to her apartment, and apparently it's been a long time since Jordan has been with a woman. So he's too quick off the mark. He comes first. And then he gets a phone call whenever he was about to pleasure her, gets a phone call and just leaves without saying anything. So Abby, feels like this was the worst one-night stand ever. This guy just legit got his rocks off and left. And she hasn't heard from him in a couple months. And they run into each other, and she just kind of like, you're a terrible person. You're also a bad lay. Then she discovers she's pregnant. Surprise pregnancy trope. I know that lots of people don't like this one. I normally don't mind it, but in this instance, I didn't love it, because not only did they have a bad one-night stand, they also have a bad reconnection. He starts basically saying that she's trying to trap him into being the baby daddy because he's super rich. His family's super rich. What he doesn't know is her family is also very super rich. She's just not taking money from them at the moment. So there's like conflict with that. conflict with her family being terrible. He also has like all kinds of stuff happening with his family, and it was just a lot. It was just a lot. I didn't love it, so I gave it 3 stars. It was just meh. It was mediocre. All right, sorry to end this. I'm kind of like a Debbie Downer, having all those kind of meh books to end it on, but yeah, it wasn't a bad reading week for me. It was actually pretty great. All right, guys, if you like this video, give it a big thumbs up, and if you're not already subscribed to my channel, make sure you subscribe to get notified at any future videos that I do. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, life's better with a little HEA. Bye, guys.